Good morning, guys. Today we're going to be talking about the blood supply to the brain, pretty much. So first things first, what is the circle of Willis? That is going to be our main ring of arteries at the base of the brain that will connect the internal carotid system with the vertebral basilar system. Its main job, well, it's here to provide collateral circulation, which is basically, if one of these pathways were to get blocked off, the blood will be able to reroute and still reach the brain. So let's kind of build the circle of Willis first by going step by step here. First, we'll start off at the top with the anterior cerebral arteries. You have one on each side. These are connected via the anterior communicating artery. Next, we'll go down to the internal carotid arteries. They will pretty much rise from the neck and feed into the circle. And branching off of each internal carotid artery, you have a middle cerebral artery. Now, these aren't necessarily part of the circle of Willis, but it's very important as it plays a major role in supplying the lateral cerebral cortex. From there, we'll go to the posterior communicating arteries. These connect the internal carotid arteries to the posterior cerebral arteries down here, which form the back of our circle. Now, let's look at the vertebral basilar system. We'll start at the bottom with the vertebral arteries coming off the subclavian arteries and traveling up the neck. Each of these gives rise to a posterior inferior cerebellar artery. We'll call it pica. These are going to supply the medulla and inferior cerebellum. From there, you have the two vertebral arteries joining to form the basilar artery, which run along the pons. I also forgot to mention that you do have the anterior spinal artery as well, branching in between the vertebral artery. These are going to go down the midline of the spinal cord. Now, back to the basilar artery. Off the basilar artery, you get the anterior inferior cerebellar artery, or the ICA. This is going to supply the anterior cerebellum and lower pons. You'll have your pontine arteries right here supplying the pons, as well as the superior cerebellar artery for the upper cerebellum and midbrain. And then finally, the basilar splits into the posterior cerebellar arteries, which rejoin the circle of Willis via the posterior communicating arteries. And that is the blood supply of the brain in a nutshell. Thank you guys for tuning in.